CSI Crime Scene Investigation could probably be considered one of the most influential television shows that's been on in a while. TV today is inundated with crime procedural dramas, but CSI was one of the first and by far the most successful. It set the template that many of the other shows in the genre tend to follow. The characters are flat, they have just barely enough personality to make them likable, and most of them are not even distinct enough to be called archetypes, but almost every episode is a compelling mystery story, and it typically makes for some entertaining television. And I didn't even know this until I stumbled onto one of the used game store, but there are a ton of CSI video games, so I decided to try one. CSI Fatal Conspiracy. I just figured, good show, interesting premise for a video game, what could possibly go wrong? Son of a biscuit! Ubisoft. It just had to be Ubisoft, the modern kings of the shitty-ass licensed game. This being the same publisher that shout out, Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Smash Up, The Avengers Battle for Earth, the list goes on. I will concede that Ubisoft is fully capable of making quality games when they're not shoved out the door completely unfinished anyway, but whenever they make a licensed game, you can pretty much bet money on the fact that it's going to suck. But hey! Even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? Maybe this will be the exception. Let's get to the nice things out of the way right now. The game's story is quite good. The game is broken into 5 cases, and each has a script written by the writers from the show. Then they're not just repurposed episodes from the show either, near as I can tell. They were written specifically for the game. Each case is a decent mystery, and about as compelling as your typical episode of CSI. The first case, you're inspecting a mud bath spa that's been burned down with a body inside, and you have to prove it was arson. Then you investigate the apparent suicide of a construction worker, that a hotel under siege by environmentalists, the murder of a wealthy hospice patient, and the death of a stoner at a car wash. The titular Fatal Conspiracy comes in when the first case's suspect is under investigation for laundering money through a drug cartel. An FBI agent starts pestering you to barge in on the case, he tricks you into destroying evidence to kick you off the case, and then the fourth case is very haphazardly tied to the cartel as well. The story is compelling and has plenty of twists and turns that keep you engaged. If you cut out all the gameplay, you'd almost have a few decent episodes of CSI. If you could tolerate the crappy graphics. The voice acting is also pretty good, even if the only voice actor from the show is Lawrence Fishburne, who only shows up for the last case anyway. Each case begins with you investigating the primary crime scene. Fatal Conspiracy plays like a point-and-click adventure game. Each location is broken into screens that you can travel between by moving your cursor around and clicking when the cursor lights up on something. This was released on the PC and all main consoles, by the way. Could you imagine playing a point-and-click game on the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox 360? You explore the crime scene looking for evidence, and you're not allowed to leave the initial crime scene until you've found everything. This becomes a particular problem in the third case, where you have to collect muddy footprints on a brown floor, with graphics so shitty and blurry you can't freaking see them! Seriously, if I had not pointed that out, would you have ever seen that? Once you've found a piece of evidence, you study it to see if you can collect additional evidence. You rub the cursor all over the item until you find a hotspot you can click on, and you choose if you want to check for blood, fingerprints, or make a casting to compare weapons. The game blocks you from using a tool that you're not supposed to use, so you can just click everything until something works, and I swear those fluids tools are used one time in the entire game. Outside of the crime scene and locations, you can visit the crime lab, where you can run tests and process your evidence, find out who the blood and fingerprints belong to, identify chemicals, all that jazz. But again, when you go to a machine to run a test, the game doesn't even let you select items that you can't use. It's pretty easy to figure out what to test where, but if you don't, you can just click everything until something works. The game almost plays itself. Check around the crime scenes until the game says you're done, click all the evidence to collect whatever the game lets you collect, go to the main lab and test everything the game allows you to test. The game flat out blocks you from doing anything that you're not supposed to do. It is impossible to lose this game! All of the machines in the lab are dirt simple to work. You just click a piece of evidence to study and either click another piece of evidence for comparison or click a few buttons to prepare a search. But the game still has a tutorial voice to explain how the machines work. Isn't it cute? The game thinks that it has mechanics.
The cursor is used to both navigate and to select.
This voice sounds like an airliner safety video, and trust me, I have recently acquired intimate knowledge of those. It's wildly out of place in this dark and gritty crime. Whoa!
For the first time, you examine evidence. Your objective, case notes, move to new locations, and change game options.
Voice was talking over itself. That's not a good sign, is it? The DNA machine sucks ass, though. Matching 2 DNA samples requires you to do this annoying minigame where you drag segments of colored dots from one sample to the other. And in later cases, each piece can go in more than one place. You can either match a sample you have to another sample you have in evidence, or you can search for a DNA sample in whatever database they store DNA in. But when you search for a DNA sample in the database, the machine is apparently only accurate enough to get 4 possible matches. You have to pull up every single option and try to jimmy the pieces into the sample. You have a 75% chance of picking the wrong sample and having to do this crap more than once. In addition to the crime scene and houses for the victims and suspects, there are 4 locations you can go between. The aforementioned lab, where you spend most of your time, the police captain's office, where you ask for warrants when you've got enough evidence, and the game will flat out tell you when you're able to do that. There's the morgue, where you go once per case to ask Herr Doctor about the victim, and the interrogation room, where you extract dialogue from suspects. If a suspect lies to you, you're given the option of refuting their statement with evidence you've collected, and you're given the option of refuting a statement even if you don't have the evidence to do it yet. Wow, those lighting effects on the back wall are really distracting. The gradients don't blend together at all. The game's graphics overall are pretty mediocre. Every character's skin has features that are pixelated out, like they made the game for the other home consoles and then reduced the texture quality rather than tailoring the graphics to the Wii. And some of the game's clues are rendered in astoundingly low-resolution graphics. Each case follows a similar format. You collect evidence at the crime scene, process it, and it leads you to a suspect. Said suspect will either point you to a new location or give you evidence that points to another suspect, and so on and so forth. The game leads you by the nose from objective to objective. It's always obvious what you're supposed to do next, and what you're supposed to do next is just click on evidence to process it. The only thing that will ever stymie you from making progress is if you can't find a clue, which will happen a lot because the game is so poorly designed. Take the victim's loft in the first level, for example. One of the major clues you notice right off the bat is the smashed-in door handle, and you obviously need to take a casting of it to compare weapons. But you can't just click on the doorknob, you have to approach the handle before you can make the casting, and the hotspot you have to click to approach the handle is so small, you'll either miss it or end up clicking the arrow to enter the loft instead, since the icon looks the same no matter which place you're trying to move to. Several of the screens inside the loft have absolutely nothing to click on. They're only there to waste your time, and a vital clue that you need to finish the level is a hair that is hidden inside a set of beads on the ground that you can't just click on. You have to find another very tiny hotspot to approach them first, and that's assuming you even figure out they're not just part of the scenery. The very first thing you notice when you get to the loft is a giant footprint outside the front door, but I tried clicking on it and nothing happened. The cursor just wouldn't light up. It wasn't until about 20 minutes later of basically beating my head against the wall because I had done everything and made no progress that the game gave me a hint to go back to the loft's entryway. And now I could click on the footprints, which also have their own screen that you have to move to. How is it even possible to screw up a game's control so that clicking on something is a pain in the ass? That's almost an achievement in screwing up. If you dick around getting nothing accomplished for about 5 minutes, the game takes pity on your sorry ass and sends you an email with a hint about what to do next. And some of the vital clues are so hard to find that the emails are often your only salvation. You can also talk to your CSI partner, one of the characters from the show assigned to you for that case, and they'll give you hints too. In theory. If your problem is that you missed a clue, then all they say is,
"Have we looked everywhere? Tested everything? Asked every question we can think of?"
You'll be beyond frustrated because you've run every test on every piece of evidence that you have, and you're screaming at the TV, "What in God's increasingly less green earth am I missing?" And the only advice your partner has is,
"Have we looked everywhere? Tested everything? Asked every question we can think of? We must be missing something."
"Yeah, screw you!" One of the pieces of evidence that you find in the first case is a boot, and at the end of case 1 I had collected and processed all the rest of the evidence. This boot was the only thing standing between me and solving the first case. I found a hotspot on the bottom of the boot indicating there's something to collect there, but I tried every single tool on this part of the boot and nothing worked. So I spent another 20 minutes wandering in circles around the locations, trying every machine in the lab, looking for anything I must have missed because clearly the boot was a dead end, but the only hint the game gave me was to process the boot. But I already tried to process the boot and nothing worked. Well, it turns out that I'm supposed to use the collection tool to pick some dirt off the boot. I'm just supposed to click it in one specific spot. Oh, forgive me for not figuring that out, since the game says the exact same thing if you use the wrong tool as it does if you're using the correct tool in the wrong spot. If the tool didn't work once, why the hell would I try it again? I found the hotspot that brings up the tools in the first place. Why the hell do I still need to click the perfect spot to get it to work? Oh, but it gets better. I still didn't have enough evidence to finish the first case, and I wasn't given any new hints. I have run every goddamn test that I am able to run on these boots, and the game is still telling me to test the boots. So what the hell am I missing? Guess what? I'm missing a fingerprint. A fingerprint that is completely invisible, and the hotspot that you need to click it is probably a few square pixels large. There's also another invisible, hard-to-click fingerprint on the toolbox, and I need both of these fingerprints to beat the level. Does my voice sound like I am kidding? You have absolutely no way of finding these damn fingerprints because you don't even know that there's anything that you are able to click there unless your cursor just happens to cross this one magic pixel of a spot. Here's an idea. If you're looking for fingerprints, why not dust the whole freaking thing for fingerprints? Why can't I only dust this one tiny spot to see if there are any prints on it? What kind of CSI are you anyway, you dumb shit? I promise you, this is the thing that will always get you stuck in this game. Running around in circles, trying to figure out what in the actual hell you're supposed to do, because the evidence that you need to get in order to beat the level, or even just make some more progress, is either invisible or has a hotspot so tiny and impossible to click that you will never find it. It took me over 2 hours to finish the first case because of all this tiny hotspot invisible clue tool only works when it feels like it bullshit. So we've got invisible items that are vital to the game, crappy controls, and poorly designed gameplay that requires almost no thought, yet is still beyond frustrating because important clues are flat out hidden from you in ways such that you'll not only stumble on them by luck. I think I've collected enough evidence to conclusively state that this game sucks rancid monkey ass. But as my perpetually useless CSI partner never tires of reminding me, test everything. The second case starts with a crime scene where over half of the screens you can travel between have absolutely nothing to click on. They only exist to waste your time. I then spent 20 minutes running around doing absolutely nothing because there are 3 invisible fingerprints that you need to get past the start of the level. One of which has such a small hotspot you'll never find it, and the other is hidden on the victim's suicide note, and I had to use the fingerprint dusting tool 10 times before I got it to work because I wasn't clicking on the one magic pixel of a spot. But that didn't stop my new partner from repeatedly telling me that I was using the wrong tool.
No fingerprints here. No fingerprints here. No fingerprints here. No fingerprints here.
Well, look who's wrong! It's like this game is practicing psychological warfare against you. If it didn't work the first time, why would I think it would work the next dozen times? That is Einstein's very definition of insanity. This was the point where I officially said screw it and looked up a walkthrough. This is probably the fastest I have ever given up on a game. I've got better things to do than to spend half an hour at a time staring at a television, getting nothing accomplished because important items are hidden so that I can't find them. Once I picked up a walkthrough, I just plowed through the rest of the game. It took me less than half the time to finish each of the game's other cases once I wasn't traipsing back over the same screens a dozen times each trying to find what the hell I was missing. But as I was playing with the walkthrough, breezing through the game with no hang-ups, I realized something. This game doesn't have any gameplay. Think about it. You get to the crime scene and you look around for evidence. This lasts about 5 minutes before you start getting pissed off because you can't figure out if you've gotten everything or what you're missing. You look at your evidence, click all over it to find new evidence, then go back to the lab and click on machines to process the evidence. There's no puzzle solving since the game flat out tells you where to go next or where to look for stuff you've missed. The only puzzle in the game is that stupid DNA matching machine. Even if you can't figure out how to process evidence, you can just click every machine until you find the one that will let you select the evidence. There's no thought to any of this. All this game is, you play crappy I Spy for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you click on stuff until you've viewed enough cutscenes to get to the next location. The bulk of the gameplay is just a step above navigating the menus on a DVD. The story is pretty much the only thing that this game has going for it, because aside from the fourth case making no goddamn sense, the story is quite good and compelling enough for me to keep playing, but because the gameplay is either non-existent or a special combination of boring and pull-your-hair-out frustrating, you'd be a lot better off just watching a playthrough by someone on YouTube. You can quite literally experience the entire game without ever picking it up, because even when you're doing things in the game, you're not actually doing anything, and the game does all of the deductions in this mystery for you. You don't have to put any thought or real effort into it. It gets to the point you're just watching the game play out, so why not cut out the middleman and save yourself about $10? So, brief detour because this game is so insubstantial that I've got some spare time in this review. The fourth case involves the murder of a cokehead girl. The suspects are her two roommates and a drug dealer her male roommate just happens to be longtime friends with. You find out the murder victim was doing research into Beatrice Salazar, the head of the drug cartel that you've been investigating. It turns out she found out that Salazar had a child at one point, gave the kid up for adoption, and that kid just happens to be her male roommate. The drug dealer killed her because she wanted to arrange a reunion between her roommate and their long-lost, totally batshit insane, bloodthirsty, runs an incredibly powerful drug cartel mother. And the drug dealer, who happens to have worked for said cartel in the past, knows he'd be in deep shit if he let all this happen. So we're supposed to believe that this stoner airhead, for no real reason, began researching the head of a drug cartel, somehow got a hold of FBI documents pertaining to an ongoing investigation, for no real reason decided to try tracking down said drug lord's long-lost kid, which just happened to be a roommate, and did all this with zero prompting because said roommate knew absolutely nothing about his birth parents. All of this coming from a dumbass who went to the car wash once a week because the brushes sound good. Was she secretly racist and assumed her Latino roommate must be the long-lost son of this other Latino woman she just happened to come across? Did she start doing all this research because she thought reuniting the drug lord with her son was going to score her free coke for life? I just cannot wrap my head around the astronomical amount of coincidences with the entire story of this case. CSI Fatal Conspiracy is bad. It's really bad. The gameplay is at once boring, frustrating, and almost non-existent. The entire time you're playing this game, you're doing one of two things: clicking items to follow a rigid but extremely simple procedure, or backtracking over every screen you visited, sweeping your cursor across the entire screen, trying to find that one vital clue that you can't continue the game without finding. And in the age of YouTube, where you can just look up all the cinematics online, there's really no reason left why anybody should buy this game. Just goes to show that nobody is safe from the curse of the licensed game, and nobody is saved from Ubisoft.
So tracking.
Alright, no more delays. We need to figure out what this code means. I already know what the code means. There's no point sending a message that won't be read by anyone. The numbers are all below 26, which means they all correspond to letters, and the letters are translated with the Vigenère cipher, the same thing that's used in Batman Arkham City for one of the Scarecrow's messages. The Vigenère cipher requires a password, and the one thing we know about him is he uses a Pikachu. And what Pikachu are we all familiar with? Shocky. Buried alive? Who was buried alive? I don't think someone was buried alive. Someone's probably using it as an alias. That phrase means something else to some gamers. What does it mean? You know what a creepypasta is? No. It's basically the gamer equivalent of a campfire horror story. Little scary tales that float around the internet, supposed to give people the creeps, or trick people into thinking they're actually real. And there are several built around the original Pokemon games, especially around Lavender Town, the city of dead Pokemon, where you fight all the ghost Pokemon in the original games. Now, allegedly, when the prototype Pokemon Red and Green versions were released in Japan, there was a string of child suicides. Those who survived their suicide attempts were reportedly horrified to be in the same room as their Game Boys. Some believe that the deaths were caused by Lavender Town syndrome, a series of subliminal messages hidden in Lavender Town. There are several components to the Lavender Town syndrome myth: hidden frequencies in the music, grim Reaper sprites in the overworld, attack animations that flash harmful images in rapid succession, all of them removed from subsequent releases of the games. One of the more outlandish theories on LTS is Buried Alive, a boss that used to be in the Pokemon Tower where the Marowak ghost is now. Buried Alive is inaccessible in all of the Pokemon games, but some claim that they've gone through the code of the prototypes and found him hidden in a piece of code called the Buryman script. According to the story, the Buryman script is incomplete. It contains no winning scenario. If you encounter Buried Alive and you beat him, the game just freezes. But the script does contain protocols for what happens when you lose. The game's main screen is overwritten with this. But of course, none of that is actually real, and even if it was, Buried Alive is just an 8-bit image and an incomplete chunk of code. So it would be much more productive to stop obsessing over the rumor and start looking for who's trying to use it to. I wondered how long it'd take to find me. What the fuck are you? You're here. I'm trapped, and I'm lonely. So very lonely. Won't you join me?